There's a recording playing in your head. It started before you had words for feelings, before you knew what a memory was. And it's been on repeat ever since. This is the story of the voice that learned to sound exactly like yours. You're 3 years old and you fall off your bike. Your knee is bleeding and you're crying, but more than the pain, you're scanning the environment for something specific. You're looking for your mother's face. Not because you need a band-aid, you need to know how afraid you should be. If her face shows calm concern, your nervous system learns, I'm hurt, but I'm safe. Someone will help me. This is manageable. If her face shows panic, your system learns, I'm in danger. The world is threatening. I need to be on high alert. If she doesn't come at all, your system learns something even more fundamental. My pain doesn't matter. I'm alone. I must handle everything myself. That moment lasts maybe 30 seconds, but the lesson lasts a lifetime. This is how programming works. Not through lectures or instructions, but through thousands of tiny moments like this, stacked on top of each other, building the architecture of what becomes your personality. Before you're 7 years old, before your explicit memory is even fully online, you're being trained, not by what people say, but by what they do, how they react, what they notice, what they ignore. You're learning the rules of being human. And here's what makes this so invisible. You don't remember learning these rules. The lessons are encoded in something called implicit memory, the type of memory that doesn't feel like memory at all. It feels like truth. It feels like just how things are. When you walk into a room and immediately scan for danger, that's not paranoia. That's the program running. When you achieve something significant and feel uncomfortable with praise, that's not humility. That's the program running. When you choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, that's not bad luck. That's the program running. Let me show you how this works at the neurological level, because it's actually stunning. Between birth and age 7, your brain is in what neuroscientists call a hypnotic state. Your brain waves are dominated by theta waves, the same frequency adults experience during deep meditation or use before sleep. In this state, you're essentially downloading your environment directly into your subconscious without the filter of critical thinking. You're not analyzing whether mom's reaction is logical. You're absorbing it as data about how reality works. Every interaction becomes a line of code in the program that will run your life. And the code is simple. If I do X, I get Y. If I cry, someone comes. Or, if I cry, I get punished. If I share my excitement, people celebrate with me. Or, if I share my excitement, people feel threatened and shut me down. If I need something, I can ask. Or, if I need something, I'm being selfish. These aren't conscious thoughts. They're deeper than thoughts. They become your sense of how the universe responds to you. Psychologists call these internal working models, the templates your brain builds to predict how relationships will function. And once these templates are installed, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. Let me give you a specific example that might feel uncomfortably familiar. Imagine a child whose parents are loving but inconsistent. Sometimes when she cries, they respond with warmth. Other times, they're irritated or distracted. There's no pattern she can predict. So her nervous system learns something specific. I can't trust that my needs will be met. I need to amplify my distress to have a chance of being seen. But even then, I might be too much. That child grows into an adult who, in relationships, oscillates between anxious pursuit and guilty withdrawal. She wants closeness desperately, but when she gets it, she feels like she's being the needy. She didn't decide to be this way. She's not broken. She's running the program that made perfect sense when she was 3. The program that kept her as safe as possible in an unpredictable environment. But now, 30 years later, the environment has changed. The program hasn't. This is what most people don't understand about psychological patterns. They're not irrational. They're outdated. They were rational solutions to childhood problems, now being applied to adult situations where they no longer work. The person who learned that expressing needs leads to rejection doesn't become an adult who suddenly trusts that vulnerability is safe. They become an adult who achieves independence at the cost of intimacy. The person who learned that their emotions overwhelmed their caregivers doesn't become an adult with healthy emotional expression. They become an adult who intellectualizes everything, living 3 feet above their body. Wondering why they feel disconnected from life? Now let's talk about something even more subtle. Emotional modeling. You didn't just learn rules about how to act, you learned which emotions are acceptable and which are forbidden, and you learned this not through what your parents said, but through what they could handle feeling. If your father never expressed sadness, only anger, you learned that sadness must be converted into anger to be expressed. If your mother responded to your anger with coldness or punishment, you learned that anger is dangerous and must be hidden. If joy in your household was met with cynicism or dismissal, you learned that joy makes you naive and vulnerable. These become the invisible limits on your emotional range. It's not that you decided I won't feel joy. It's that joy triggers an unconscious alarm. This feeling isn't safe. So your system shuts it down before you even notice it was starting. And here's where it gets truly strange. You'll interpret this shutdown as your authentic self. I'm just not an emotional person. I'm naturally reserved. I don't get too excited about things. No. You were trained not to be an emotional person. You learned to be reserved. You were taught that excitement is dangerous. But the training was so early and so thorough that it feels like your nature. This is the genius and the tragedy of childhood programming. It hides itself by becoming you. Let's go deeper into something that affects almost everyone watching this, the script round. Worthiness. Between ages 2 and 7. You formed a core belief about whether you're fundamentally okay. Not whether you're perfect, but whether your existence is acceptable, whether you belong, whether you're worth the space you take up. This belief didn't form from what people said. It formed from how people acted when you were just being. If your presence was welcomed, if your needs were generally met, if your emotions were generally tolerated, if mistakes were treated as learning rather than character flaws, you internalized, I'm okay. One belong here. But if your needs felt like burdens, if your emotions seemed to drain or overwhelm the adults around you, if love felt conditional on performance, you internalized something different. Something is wrong with me. I have to earn the right to be here. That belief becomes the foundation everything else is built on. And it manifests in ways you'd never connect back to childhood. The person who can't accept compliments isn't being modest. They're running a program that says if people really knew me, they wouldn't say that. The person who overworks themselves to exhaustion isn't ambitious. They're trying to finally earn the sense of okayness that should have been given freely when they were 5. The person who self-sabotages right before success isn't lazy. They're terrified that achievement won't fix the fundamental feeling of not enoughness they've been carrying since childhood. And if it doesn't fix it, then what? Then they have to face the truth. The problem isn't external achievement, it's internal belief. That realization is so threatening that sabotage feels safer. Better to never find out if success makes you feel worthy. Better to preserve the hope that if I just achieved more, then I'd finally feel okay. Now I want to address something that might be coming up for you right now. You might be thinking, but I had a good childhood. My parents loved me. This doesn't apply. Here's what's crucial to understand. This isn't about whether your parents were good or bad. Almost always, they were doing their best with their own programming. This is about something more subtle, what your nervous system learned about how the world works. You can have loving parents and still learn problematic patterns. Maybe they loved you deeply but were anxious, so you learned that the world is threatening and you must stay vigilant. Maybe they praised your achievements but not your character, so you learned your worth is conditional on performance. Maybe they protected you from all discomfort, so you never learned that you can survive difficult emotions. These aren't abusive, but they're still programming. And the most insidious part is that good enough childhood doesn't feel like it counts as a reason for adult struggles. So you blame yourself. I should be fine. I had it better than most people. What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. You just downloaded a program that no longer serves you. Let me tell you about the moment most people realize they're running someone else's script. It usually happens in an intimate relationship. You find yourself reacting to your partner in a way that makes no logical sense. They make a simple request, and you feel criticized. They want closeness, and you feel suffocated. They need space, and you panic. And in that moment, if you're really honest with yourself, you notice something shocking. You sound like your parent, or you're reacting to your partner as if they're your parent. The same tone of voice, the same defensive posture, the same argument that's been happening in your family for 3 generations. This is the moment the invisible becomes visible. You realize, oh God, I'm not in this relationship. I'm in a memory of a relationship. I'm responding to a ghost. Your partner is a real person with their own needs and wounds, but you're relating to them through a lens grounded in childhood. You're trying to resolve something that happened 30 years ago with someone who wasn't even there. This is what Freud called repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate unresolved childhood dynamics in adult relationships. Not because you're broken, but because your psyche is trying to heal itself. It's bringing you back to the scene of the original wound with a different cast of characters, hoping this time it will end differently. But it can't end differently until you realize you're in a repetition. Until then, you'll just keep casting new actors in the same old roles. Let's talk about something that might be the most important part of this entire video, the difference between healing and understanding. You can intellectually understand everything I'm saying and still be completely controlled by your programming, because the program isn't stored in the thinking brain, it's stored in the body, in the nervous system, in the implicit memory networks that operate below conscious awareness. Reading about attachment theory doesn't reprogram your attachment style. Knowing your parents were anxious doesn't automatically make you less anxious. Understanding why you self-sabotage doesn't stop you from self-sabotaging. This is why therapy can sometimes feel frustrating. You gain insight after insight, but you still do the same things. That's because insight activates the neocortex, the thinking brain. But the program is running in the limbic system, the feeling brain. And the feeling brain doesn't speak English. It speaks emotion, sensation, and implicit memory. To change the program, you have to access it where it lives. This usually means feeling things you've spent your entire life learning not to feel. It means letting the grief come, the anger, the terror, the heartbreak of realizing that thing I needed as a child, I'm never going to get it from the person I needed it from. That realization breaks something open, not your spirit, but the fantasy that kept you imprisoned. The fantasy that if you're just good enough, perfect enough, small enough, successful enough, then finally they'll show up the way you needed. They won't. Not because they're cruel, but because they can't give what they don't have. And sitting with that reality, really sitting with it, feeling the full weight of that loss is when change becomes possible. Because as long as you're still hoping to change the past, you can't live in the present. Let's talk about what actual change looks like when you start rewriting the script. First, you have to catch the program running in real time. This requires developing what therapists call the observing self, the part of you that can watch your own reactions without being completely swept away by them. You're in an argument with someone you love, and you notice, oh, my chest is tight. My breathing is shallow. I'm about to shut down or explode. In that moment of noticing, there's a gap, a choice point. You can run the program, shut down, explode, whatever your default is. Or you can do something radical, pause. Just for 5 seconds, breathe. And ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? Because if you feel like a child, small, powerless, desperate to be understood, or afraid of being abandoned, you're probably in a flashback. Not a visual flashback, an emotional one. Your nervous system is responding to the present as if it's the past. Once you recognize this, you can speak to that young part of yourself. I see you. I know you're scared. But we're not 3 years old anymore. We're safe. We can handle this. This isn't affirmations. This is reparenting, giving yourself now what you needed then. Over time, with practice, that young part starts to trust you, starts to relax, starts to allow you to respond from your adult self instead of your wounded child self. And your relationships transform, not because the other person changes, but because you stop bringing ghosts into the room. Here's something that's important to understand. You're not trying to eliminate the program. You're trying to update it. The child who learned to be hypervigilant because their environment was chaotic doesn't need to unlearn vigilance. They need to learn, I can relax now. The danger has passed. The child who learned to suppress their needs because their needs overwhelmed their caregivers doesn't need to become demanding. They need to learn, my needs matter. Expressing them doesn't make me a burden. The child who learned that achievement is the only path to love doesn't need to stop achieving. They need to learn, I'm valuable even when I'm not performing. My worth is inherent. This is the work, not erasing who you had to become to survive childhood, but expanding beyond it, honoring the adaptation while recognizing it's no longer necessary. There's something profound that happens when you truly understand that your patterns aren't personality, they're programming. It creates space. Suddenly, that voice that criticizes you relentlessly isn't your voice. It's an internalized voice from someone who is also running a program. That impulse to abandon relationships when they get too close isn't you being difficult. It's a survival mechanism from when closeness meant losing yourself. That feeling that you're fundamentally flawed isn't reality. It's a conclusion a child drew with limited information. And conclusions drawn by children don't have to govern adults. You can thank the program for keeping you safe when you needed it. And then, gently, consciously, you can start writing something new. Not by forcing yourself to be different, but by creating experiences that teach your nervous system. The old rules don't apply anymore. This might mean staying in a conversation when every instinct says run. It might mean expressing a need when your whole body says you're being too much. It might mean receiving love when your mind insists they'll leave once they really know you. Each time you do the opposite of what the program dictates and survive no, thrive, you're writing a new line of code. Slowly, gradually, your system learns. Oh, the world has changed. I can be different now. Here's what I want you to understand. This isn't about blame. Your parents were running programs written by their parents, who were running programs written by their parents. Trauma and adaptation get passed down through generations like genetic code. The anger your father couldn't express, that was probably his father's silence. The anxiety your mother carried, that was probably her mother's fear. The patterns you're struggling with right now, you're not the first in your family to struggle with them, but you can be the last. When you do this work, when you identify the program and consciously choose something different to reign, not just healing yourself, you're breaking a chain that's been binding your family for generations. If you have children, or might have children, you're giving them a different starting program. Not a perfect one. There's no such thing, but one with more flexibility, more emotional range, more room to be themselves. This is how generational healing works. One person decides the pattern stops here. So if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, if this video is bringing up grief or anger or a deep exhaustion, that's not weakness. That's recognition. You're seeing the invisible architecture for the first time, and seeing it is the first step toward changing it. You don't have to do this alone. In fact, you can't do it alone, not fully, because the wounds were created in relationship, and they heal in relationship. Whether that's therapy, or deep friendships, or a partner who's willing to witness your process without trying to fix it. The point is, you need someone to see you as you actually are, not as you learn to present yourself. Someone who can hold space for the parts of you that the program says are unacceptable. In that witnessing, in that unconditional presence, the program starts to dissolve. Because the program's entire foundation is, if they really saw me, they'd reject me. And when someone really sees you and doesn't reject you, the foundation cracks. That's when real change becomes possible. Before we close, I want to leave you with something that might shift your entire relationship with yourself. Every pattern you're running, every program you're executing, every adaptation you made, it worked at the time, in that environment, with those resources. It kept you safe, it helped you survive the hypervigilance, the people-pleasing, the emotional shutdown, the perfectionism. These weren't mistakes, they were brilliant solutions to impossible problems. You didn't learn these patterns because you're weak, you learned them because you're resilient. The same intelligence that adapted to survive childhood is available now to create something new. You're not broken, you're not defective, you're not too much or not enough. You're a person who learned to survive in the environment you were given, and now you're learning to thrive in the life you're choosing. That's not pathology. That's evolution. And the fact that you're watching this video, that you're willing to look at these patterns, that you're not defending against disinformation, but absorbing it, that means the program is already started to loosen its grip, because awareness changes everything, not instantly, not perfectly, but genuinely. You can unknow what you now know, and knowing really knowing, not just intellectually but in your body that your patterns are programs, not truth. That's freedom beginning. If this resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these patterns, subscribe to this channel, not because I have all the answers, but because you're not meant to figure this out alone. We're building a community of people doing this work, the deep and comfortable, necessary work of understanding the invisible forces that shape us, and maybe, together, we can write something new.